It's time for another one of Jayda's pocket pets. So I thought we would dive into the magical pocket together and see who's on deck. It's a puppy! I've had a lot of requests to make a sweet little puppy and also a pocket pet version of a puppy. So I thought we would make this little guy with his big floppy ears and his little tiny tongue sticking out. And I just thought he was the cutest little version of a puppy I could think of. I love it when puppies have big floppy ears. I think they look so cute. So, we're making a puppy today. Now, if you've made the Pocket Pet kitty cat, you'll recognize some of the standard parts of this Pocket Pet. And in fact, the first part of the Pocket Pet puppy is also the same as the Pocket Pet kitty cat. So you're going to want a little bit of that as a reminder, and I will make sure that the link to the Pocket Pet kitty cat is in the description box down below, and we'll also stick in an annotation later so you can jump over there and refresh yourself if you need to. But without further ado, let's take our little puppy and his little wagging tail and go on over to the craft table, grab our supplies, and start making some more little pocket pets. In order to make our Pocket Pet puppy, these are the materials that you're going to need. I have used 3 different colors making my little puppy. So one ear is a different color, his body is a different color, I've got a little different colored patch on his eye and his tail. Now you can use felt if you want for the eye patch and for his tongue, but I've used yarn for those main pieces and the tongue a little something different, and I will show you what that is. I used craft embroidery floss. So this is craft floss. It's not truly embroidery floss, although you can use that. It's really thin, as you can see, and I crocheted it using a size 2 crochet hook, like a 2mm crochet hook. It's this thing right here. So it looks pretty small, and if you've done some of the other small stuff with me, then you know, you won't be any stranger to it. But if this looks too intimidating, you can just make a simple little sort of, it's about the same size of the end of your index finger, a little piece of felt that size, and you can just sew that across his mouth, and that can be his tongue. You're also going to need some embroidery floss or craft floss for his nose, and I've embroidered on his nose and a little bit of a mouth, and for that you're going to need an embroidery needle. And that is this thing right here. So an embroidery needle has a slightly larger eye than a regular sewing needle because it has to be big enough in order to pass your floss through. For the rest of the body, I used my favorite 4.25mm hook, or a G6, and that's the regular hook I'm using with this yarn, which is all worsted weight yarn. It's all the same size. It's sort of a 4-ply worsted weight yarn, and it's just some scraps. Obviously you don't need this much. You need very little because this is a scrap project, but these are just sort of extra colors I had lying around, and that's what I want to use on my puppy today. You also need a pair of scissors and a yarn needle. So that's a needle with a really large eye that allows your yarn to go through it. And for his eyes, you're going to need a couple of beads or flat-topped buttons or safety eyes. And of course, you're going to need a little bit of stuffing. And I'm using homemade stuffing today, and I have a quick tip on how to make your own homemade stuffing. And if you want to check that out, I'll put that link in the description box. So once you've got all of your materials assembled, we'll get started. The first thing you want to make is the body of our little Pocket Pet puppy. So that's the main part of the body and the bottom, which all fit together. And since we've already done this in the Pocket Pet kitty video, if you click on this link right here, it'll take you to the Pocket Pet kitty cat video, and you can make the body and the bottom, and then come on back, and the rest of it will be all puppy parts. The first thing we're going to make after we've got our body is we're going to make the little arms, and the arms are also the same as the kitty cat, but I'm going to go through them again with you just as a little refresher. So you want 2 of them. They look like this when they're finished, and I'm going to make mine in the same color as the body And you can do yours in any color that you like. But I'm going to take my main body color and my 4.25 millimeter hook. And I'm going to start with a cinch circle. And most of the pieces of my little pocket pet puppy start with a cinch circle. There we go. And once you've got your cinch circle made, you're going to single crochet 5 into that cinch circle. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Grab that little tail and cinch it nice and shut, tightly. And then we're going to continue working into the next stitch. So no joining with a slip stitch. We're just going to continue single crocheting around. And the next 2 rows, rows 2 and 3, are just a single crochet in each stitch all the way around. So each row will have 5 stitches in it, and that is how you make this cute little arm piece. So single crochet directly into the next stitch. I like to work over my little short tails, but you can just pull them to the back and use them as stuffing. And once you've got 2 rows of just straight single crochet done, you're all finished. Once you've completed your 3 rows, so your first row is your cinch circle with your 5 single crochet, and then row 2 and row 3 are just single crocheting all the way around. Once you finish your 3rd row, you're going to slip stitch into that next stitch just to fasten off the row, and then cut enough tail that you can sew your little arm to your pocket pet. And once you've snipped your tail, just grab your thread, pull it back through that loop, and give it a nice tight tug. And there you go. You want 2 arms for your pocket pet puppy. The next part of our pocket pet puppy we're going to make are the ears. Now I've given my puppy nice long floppy ears because I just think that is such a cute look on a little puppy. And I'm going to make mine like I did with this one in 2 different colors. So the first one I made in the same color as the body of my pocket pet. And the other one I'm going to make in a slightly darker color. Now you can do them both the same color if you want, but I kind of like that mismatched mutt look. So I'm going to do mine in 2 different colors. And this is how you make the ears. We're going to take our yarn and we're going to start with a cinch circle. Once you have your cinch circle made, you want to single crochet 6 single crochets into your circle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Once you've got your 6 single crochets, grab the short tail, pull it nice and tight, and we're going to work directly into the next stitch. So no joining the row with a slip stitch, we're just going to work directly into the next stitch. Now row 2 is an increase row. We're going to put 2 single crochets into each stitch all the way around. So you're going to have 12 stitches at the end of row 2. So work directly into that next stitch. I'm going to work over my tail. You can keep yours to the back if you like. There's the first one. And come on. There's the second one. So 2 single crochet in the first stitch and 2 single crochet in each stitch all the way around row 2 for a total of 12. 11, 12. Once you've finished row 2 and you've got 12 stitches all the way around, it's always good to take a moment and count if you're not sure. The next rows, so 3 through 8, so the next 5 rows, rows 3 through 8, you're going to single crochet into each stitch all the way around. So it's just straight single crocheting. So straight single crochet, 1 stitch in each single crochet. Each row will have a total of 12 stitches. And once you get to the end of row 8, I will tell you what we're doing next. Alright, here I am at the end of row 8. So my first row started with 6, my second row was 12, and rows 3 through 8 are all a single crochet in each stitch all the way around. So you should still have a total of 12 stitches at the end of row 8. Now we're going to close the ear in a little bit. So you see here, there's the bottom of the ear, and this is sort of up to row 8. It's this nice sort of straight flat. And we want to close the ear in a little bit so that when we attach it to his head, it's sort of a little thinner at the top. And this is how we're going to go about doing that. We're going to single crochet the next 2 stitches together. So you insert your hook in the next stitch and bring up a loop, just as though you were going to single crochet. But before you finish, you insert your hook in the next stitch and bring up a loop, so that you've got 3 loops on your hook. Then you wrap and pull back through all 3 loops. So that's single crocheting 2 stitches together. Then we're just going to single crochet normally into the next 2 stitches, 1 and 2, and then we're going to decrease again. So we're going to single crochet 2 stitches together, pull up a loop in the first stitch, pull up a loop in the next stitch, wrap your yarn, pull back through all 3 loops. So that's a decrease. Then we're going to single crochet into the next 2 stitches, nice and normal. And then we're going to decrease one last time. Pull up a loop in the first stitch, pull up a loop in the next stitch, 1, 2, 3, wrap your yarn, pull back through all 3 loops, decrease made. Now we're going to single crochet in the last 2 stitches of this row, and if you do a stitch count, you should have 9 stitches all the way around. We decreased 3 times, so we've gone from 12 to 9. Now you're going to do rows 10 through 12, so 3 more rows, in just straight single crochet. So you're going to single crochet in each stitch around for 3 more rows, and by the time you get to the end of row 12, we'll be all finished our little ear. Once you're at the end of row 12, if you flatten out your ear, you should see there's sort of a natural sort of pinching happening, because we decreased in row 9, and then rows 10 through 12 were just more straight single crochet. So the bottom part of your ear will be a little fatter than the top part. And to close off our row, we're going to slip stitch into the next stitch, and you're going to leave a long enough tail that you can sew the ear onto your puppy. So just leave a little tail, and then fasten off by pulling it through the loop on your hook. Just a little note on your ears. If one of them comes out a little bit bigger than the other, it could be because the size of the yarn you were using was a little bit thicker, or it could be because you were a little bit tighter the first time or a bit looser the next time. This is not a big deal. This puppy actually has 2 different sized ears. Same amount of stitches, same number of rows, it's just that this yarn was a little thicker than this yarn. Once again, I do like that mutt puppy look. If you want both of your ears to be exactly the same, then it's probably a good idea to use the same color, because chances are they'll work out being identical. But I promise you, once you get them onto your puppy, you won't notice. And a little bit of asymmetry is cute, I think, on little puppies. If you're going to crochet the eye patch with me, we're going to do that part now. Like I said before, you can use felt if you want. Just cut a nice circle of felt and sew it down onto the front of your puppy where you think you want it underneath your eye. But if you want to crochet it, it's really, really simple, and I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to take a third color. So this is sort of the orange color I had, and I'm going to start with a cinch circle. There we go. And into my cinch circle, I'm going to single crochet 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 single crochet. I'm going to cinch it nice and tight. I'm going to continue working into the next stitch, so I'm not going to slip stitch to join the row. I'm just going to keep right on working. And row 2 is an increase row, so I'm going to work 2 single crochets into each stitch all the way around. So I'm going to work directly into the next stitch. I'm going to put 2 single crochets into that stitch. I'm also going to work over my tail, and I'm going to put 2 single crochets in each stitch all the way around. Row 2 will have a total of 8 stitches. And once you're at the end of row 2, we're going to slip stitch into that next stitch. That fastens off the row. And then same thing, you're going to cut yourself enough tail that you can sew the eye patch onto the face of your little puppy using that tail. Grab it, pull it through the loop, pull it nice and tight. You can trim off any of the little ends. So for example, if you've got like a little bit of that short tail, you can weave it in or snip it off. And that is the eye patch done. The next little part of our puppy we're going to make is his cute little tail. And this I'm going to make in the same color as I made the eye patch. And this is kind of a funky build. So I'm going to do the whole thing nice and slow, and you guys can do it right along with me. We are going to start with a slip knot, not a cinch circle. Once again, make sure it moves around on your hook, isn't too tight or too loose. We're going to chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 chains. We're going to slip stitch into the second chain from the hook. So there's the first, and here's the second. We're going to slip stitch into that chain. We're going to slip stitch into the third chain, and we're going to single crochet into the last 2. So slip stitch, single crochet, single crochet. There you go. So you chain 5, single crochet, or I should say slip stitched into the second chain from the hook, slip stitched into the next one, single crocheted, single crocheted. That is the end of side 1. Now we're going to chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's another chain of 5 off of the first half of the tail, and now we're going to repeat the same pattern, and it goes something like this. Slip stitch into the second chain from the hook, slip stitch into the next chain, single crochet into the last 2 chains. So there's a single crochet in chain number 3 and a single crochet in the last chain. There we go. So now you've got 2 sides, 2 halves of the same tail. You're going to leave a long tail of yarn and you're going to fasten off. So that last single crochet, you don't do anything after that, you just cut a long tail and fasten off. Now the cool part. We're going to grab our yarn needles. We're going to thread them up with that nice long tail you left behind. And we're going to sew the tail pieces together. So you match up the two ends and just sort of lay them together like that. If you've got this little bit of a tail, you can either weave it in or tuck it into the middle and hide it as you go. And that's probably what I'll do. And all you want to do is hold the ends together, and maybe it's a good idea to sort of start on the side that your yarn comes out of, and just pick up a stitch on one side of the tail and the corresponding stitch on the other side, and sew the edges together. Remember, if you're going to tuck that little bit of tail into the middle, to just sort of keep stuffing it in there. You can also trim it if it's too big, but I kind of like to use it as a little bit of stuffing. Pick up the next two set of stitches. Make sure they're right across from each other, because you don't want your tail to be crooked, or, you know, a little bit of crooked is okay, but not too what's the word I want? I don't want the two sides to be too out of sync with each other. Pick up the next set of stitches, and just kind of keep doing this all the way around the little tiny tail that you're making for your puppy. When you get to the end, you might want to put a couple stitches sort of like over across the top, so you can do a couple in place, or just one if you like the look of it. And then you flip it over and you do the exact same thing up the opposite side. This creates a really cute little kind of short triangular looking tail, and I've noticed that lots of little puppies have short little short tails because they haven't really grown with the rest of their body yet, and I love that look when they're wiggling their short little tails. It's just so cute. Once you get back up to the very end again, you should have something that looks something like this. It's kind of a sort of a slightly off-kilter triangular tail, and that's exactly what this one looks like. Now when you get it sewn onto the back of your puppy, you can also sort of force the edge up a little bit. You can kind of put a little kink in it. You can leave it straight too if you want, but because we've sewn two tiny pieces of crocheted fabric together, we've given it a bit of stiffness that it might not otherwise have, and it wouldn't have if it was stuffed, and that allows us to sort of mold the shape a little bit into the final tail shape that we want on our puppy. But we can complete that once we've got it sewn on to the back end of our little doggy. Now we're going to make our little puppy's tongue. You can make this a simple little piece of felt if you like. You don't have to do this little crocheted thing if you feel it might be a little bit too trying or a little annoying, or you don't have the supplies handy. Felt looks just as cute, so you can cut out a little piece of felt and just sew along the back edge to the front of your dog when we go to put him together. But if you want to attempt this tiny crochet tongue, then I'm going to do that right now. You want to take your embroidery floss or your craft floss, whatever that small bit of string is that you're using, and you want a small hook. I'm using a size, this is a 2, a sort of an English size 2. I think this also is close to 2 millimeters or 1.75 millimeters. It's not a super tiny steel hook size, but it's also not terribly big either. But I do like this size. I find it works nice and neatly with this floss, and I've done several cute little projects now using this, and I like the way it works out. So that is my choice of hook size for this floss. We're going to make a cinch circle. So if you're not used to working small, remember to be patient with yourself. This is a little on the tricky side. Working tiny, especially when you've got fingers that aren't super small, can be a little on the trying side. So just be patient with yourself and pause the video if you have to. And if you're going to try this for the first time, then that's awesome, because part of the fun of crochet is all of the experimentation. And if you're anything like me, you may avoid working small for a long time and then finally try it and then just get completely excited about it like I did. Once you've got your cinched circle, we're going to single crochet 5 into that circle. And this is no different than working with a larger hook and larger yarn. You just have to maybe work a little slower than you might otherwise. So single crochets are exactly the same, and manipulating that cinched circle is exactly the same, but it might take a little bit more time just to get the string to go where you want it to. And once you've got your 5 single crochets, same thing, grab that tiny wee little tail and give it a nice tight tug, and there's the beginning of the end of our tongue. Now we're going to continue working, so we're going to work directly into that next single crochet, and it's that little tiny one right there at the tip of my crochet hook, and we're going to single crochet 2 stitches into each stitch all the way around. So we begin with 5, we're going to finish row 2 with 10. I'm going to work over my short tail, but if that's just way too complicated for you at this point, just hold it to the back and ignore it, and you can weave it in later. So 2 single crochets into each stitch all the way around, and go slowly if you have to. This is not a race. Okay, I have finished row 2. There are 10 single crochets all the way around. This is a very small little circle, but if you've gotten this far and you like what you're looking at, then you too may be a candidate for tiny crochet. We're going to do one more row of just straight single crochet. So row 3 is just 1 stitch per stitch all the way around. So when you get to the end of row 3, you should still have 10 single crochets. Okay, I have finished row 3. I'm going to fasten off by slip stitching into that next stitch. So see how tiny these little stitches look. And like most of these pieces, I'm going to leave a nice long tail that I can sew the tongue to my little puppy with. So that's enough. And then fasten off, grab that tail, pull it through the loop that's on your hook, give it a nice tight tug, and there you go. One tiny little tongue. Now it's time to assemble our little pocket pet puppy. Take the bottom of your pocket pet and thread it up with your yarn needle, and you want to make sure that you've stuffed your pocket pet body not too heavily. You don't want the holes to be showing, so just put enough stuffing in it that it feels sort of firm and can sort of take the right shape that you want. And once you've got all that in there, you're going to just sort of squeeze the bottom a little bit and look for where you fastened off. And there might be a little natural divot or just a sort of a funny bit of a bump. I like to line that up with the same fasten off space on the bottom piece. You don't have to do that. It's just a little something that I like to do because it kind of gives me a starting point. So I run my needle through that same spot, kind of the same 2 fasten off points on both pieces, and that's my first stitch. And because you should have the exact same number of stitches along the bottom of your body as you do along the bottom piece, then all you have to do is pick up the next set of stitches all the way along and just keep sewing 2 sets of stitches, one on either piece, together as you go, and you will eventually close in the bottom. When you get to the end, if you're one over or one less, don't worry about it, just cheat it shut. This is, after all, a little pocket pet, and no one's going to notice the bottom. Once you've gotten all the way back around to the beginning, you just want to maybe do one more little sort of stitch in the starter starter spot where you had your two sort of fasten off areas. You can and you don't have to, but I like to do that. And then you're just going to make a tiny knot along the bottom of your pocket pet. So pick up a stitch and just knot it off nice and tightly. And then just weave in the rest of your tail. So I like to use the back and forth method here because that'll kind of lock the tail into place. So I pick up a bunch of stitches, pull it through one way, excuse me, skip that one little, like that half a stitch that I came out of, skip over top of it, go back through the same stitches, and then that's it. I'm just going to weave in the end, and now my pocket pet body is all put together. Now I think we should put on the face. We're going to put on his face next. So before we put on his ears or his arms, we're going to put on his face. And because the eye patch is the biggest feature on his face, we're going to start with the eye patch. I'm going to identify my, along the bottom, sort of where the two end off pieces were, so that, because that's sometimes a little bit of a bump. It's not super obvious, but it's just obvious enough that I'm going to make that the back of my pocket puppy, and the front then is going to be sort of nice and smooth and gives me a nice solid smooth work space to kind of put his face on. So I'm going to take the eye patch that I made and I'm going to just sort of move it around his face. I think I like it on the right side. I suppose that's his left side if he was looking outward, but my right, his left. And I'm going to remember that I probably want his nose to be somewhere in the middle, just a little tiny triangle, and just a wee little mouth underneath that, and the tongue, which I can even pick up and use, I'm probably going to have somewhere near the third row up. So there's bottom row, second row, third row. So I'm probably going to want the tongue somewhere around there. You can already kind of see his face. And that means that this is probably a pretty good place to put my eye patch. So I'm going to just hold it in place with my thumb, and I'm going to thread up my yarn needle with the tail, and all I'm going to do is just hold it in place with my thumb and work my way around the patch by picking up a little piece of a stitch on the body and then picking up a stitch on the eye patch. And this kind of makes it a little easier to sort of work all the way around the eye patch because you're not trying to use two stitches together at the same time. So I'm going to pick up another piece of a stitch. There's a piece of a stitch, and actually the stitch of the eye is right close to it. So one little piece at a time. And I'm going to keep making sure that I like where my eye patch is located. And pick up a piece of the body, and then the stitch. And I'm just going to work like that all the way around until my eye patch is completely sewn down. Once you've worked all the way around the outside of your eye patch, if you've got enough tail left, I like to sort of do this. I'm going to take my needle, stick it into the body, and go right out the back. Because later, when I sew on my little tongue, I'm going to bring that tail all the way out through the back too, and knot the two pieces together, and then weave them back into the body. That way I won't have any knots actually on the outside of my work, and I just feel that it kind of makes things look a little bit neater. So that's the eye patch on. Now I think I'm going to put on the eyes, and then that will determine where the rest of my little face goes. It's pretty obvious where my first eye is going to go. It's going to go right in the center of my little eye patch. And because I kind of like that wide set apart eye look, I think I'm going to try and make them equidistant. So without my fingers and hands being in the way too much, that's kind of where I like my eyes to sit. So now you could have them kind of not as far apart, but I want to have just enough space between them that if there was another eye patch of the equal size on the other side of my of my little pocket pet, then there would be sort of the same amount of space between the center and the edge of that spot. I hope that kind of makes sense. But that's where I'm going to place my eyes. And in order to sew them down, I'm going to use a piece of the embroidery floss that I'm going to end up sewing, embroidering my little nose with. So I'm just going to take a sort of a piece of this. And I don't need too much because most embroidery floss is actually six plies, so there's 6 threads that make this up. And if you were just using regular sewing thread, that would be 1 ply, 2 ply if you double it up. But this is 6, so I don't need a whole lot because I don't need to put in that many stitches on the back of each eye. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to thread up my embroidery needle, and might have to do this a couple times. Get all that fluff out of the way. There we go. And I'm going to take my embroidery needle and bring it in right in the middle, sort of where I think the middle between my 2 eyes are going to be. Bring it out to the center of my eye patch, as you can see that, and leave some tail. So I'm just going to leave a little bit of the end, because when I'm finished putting on both eyes, I'm going to come back out through that same space, knot the 2 ends together, and pull it back into the body. And once again, that saves me from having sort of knots on the outside of my work. Now, I'm just going to sew down my button. I'm only going to put a couple of stitches through here. I'm going to try and make this nice and tight. Maybe I'll go into the eye patch a little bit. There we go. Now I'm going to sort of zip across to the opposite side of my face where I want the other eye to go. And I'm going to put a couple stitches into that eye. And then I'm going to come back and finish by putting another couple stitches on this one. And the reason I'm doing that is because this eye is going to sit out a little bit further than this one because of the eye patch we put on. But if I finish by putting a couple of extra stitches in this last eye, when I knot everything up, it will pull it back a little more. So it'll make the eye sit a little more evenly on the face. There we go. Now I'm going to run back underneath and out through the middle of the eye patch, and I'm going to sort of put one last stitch through that eye because I want to pull it down into the body of the little doggy as best I can. So one last stitch, and then I'm going to bring it back out through here where where I brought it in the first place. Knot the 2 ends together and weave it back into the body. Alright, I've got both the eyes on. I knotted the 2 ends together and pulled them back into the body, and as you can tell, there are no obvious knots on the front of my pocket pet. So that's just sort of a nice, neat and tidy way of taking care of sewing things on. Next, we're going to put on his little wee nose. This little puppy's nose is a very simple triangle, and that's pretty much what I'm going to do with my second puppy's nose. I'm going to pick one little spot, sort of one stitch in the middle of his face. So say, maybe this one right here, and it kind of butts underneath the eye patch, which is fine. And I'm going to use the bottom of it as sort of the bottom point of the nose. So I'm going to thread up my yarn needle using the color I want to make his little nose and mouth. And I'm going to bring my needle in somewhere out of the way. So I don't want it to be in the way of where I'm going to put the nose or the mouth, but I want it to be somewhere close by so that I can exit through the same hole and do the same thing I did for the eyes, sort of knot the ends together. So I'd say There's the middle part. So I want that to be the bottom of the nose. I'm going to pull my thread through so that there's only a little bit left. That's enough to knot with. And then I'm going to only go as high as a single stitch. I'm going to start making straight stitches, so always coming out the same little bottom point of the bottom of the nose, and making stitches. So first on an angle to my right, and then a few on an angle to my left, and then a few in the middle. And that will just eventually close in a simple little triangle, and that will look like his nose. So a couple, try to keep the top of it sort of somewhat straight, and just take your time. This is embroidery, and embroidery can be really simple. It can also be kind of complicated, but if you're nice and loose with your stitches, I'm going to make a couple stitches now to the left. Just keep your stitches nice and loose. Don't make them too tight. You don't want to pull anything out of alignment. There we go. And keep going over and over and over the same little spot, coming out the same bottom point. Use your thumb as a guide. And pretty soon you'll see that there's a nice little triangle filling in. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill in the middle pieces, and then we're going to do the mouth. The little tiny mouth bit that I added to the nose on my first pocket puppy is basically one simple little tiny straight stitch right out the bottom point of the nose, and then I went back and forth across 2.5 stitches a few times just to kind of create what I consider an upper lip, because I wanted to sew this this little tongue to that mouth, so that it was sort of, the tongue is more the focal point of the mouth and not so much the mouth. So I'm just making like a little guide, almost like a little color guide, to look like an upper lip for my tongue to be sewn on the bottom of. So I'm going to do the same thing with this little pocket puppy. So I've finished making all of the vertical and sort of slightly diagonal stitches to create my nose. And now I'm going to make just the smallest little straight stitch right out the bottom of the nose. So I'm just going to basically put my needle into the body of my little pocket pet, and I'm going to bring it out right where I want to start making his mouth, his upper lip. And because I said I wanted to put the tongue sort of across the third row, I'm going to bring it out just on the inside of one eye. So sort of if I did a direct line from the inside of that eye down, I'm going to bring my needle out there. And that creates that little short bit. It's kind of difficult to see, but there it is, little tiny short bit. And then I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to bring it across, look at my eyes, line it up. I'm only going to cross I'm going to cross 3 stitches here, so that this is just inside the other sort of side of the other eye. And then I'm going to go back and forth, maybe 2, maybe 3 times, just to kind of establish an upper lip for my puppy. I think 2 will be enough. So when I bring my needle down here, I'm going to end up with 2 little strings, and then I'm going to finish by bringing it out in the same place that I originally brought the sort of the thread in, so that I can sew both ends together, or I should say knot the ends together. There we go. Don't want it to be too tight. Good. I'm going to trim it, and I'm going to sort of knot the 2 ends together. And then I'm going to weave it back into the body, and then this will be ready to sew my little tongue onto. Okay, it's time to put on his little tongue. So I've threaded up the tail that I left on my tongue with my embroidery needle, because this is the skinnier floss. And I'm going to make sort of the cast off, or the fasten off side, the edge of my tongue. I'm going to pinch the tongue together so that it lies flat, and I'm going to lay it flat against the bottom of the lip. So the little lip I made with embroidery floss here. Push the lip up a little bit just so I can see the 3 stitches underneath. And then I'm going to very carefully pick up a piece of the stitch, of the first stitch under the lip of that little mouth, not pull it tight all the way, and then pass it through stitches on both sides, so both sides of that little tongue that I made. Then I'm going to pull it tight. I'm going to pick up another stitch along the underside of the lip on the body, and then pick up stitches on both sides of the little tongue. And I'm going to do that all the way across so that it sort of gets sewn right underneath the mouth of my little puppy. And when I'm finished, I'm not going to knot it. I'm going to take my thread and pass it through to the back of the body, out the same space that I took the stitch, the end of the tail for the eye patch, knot the edges together, and then weave it in. And that will keep me from having to have a knot at the side of my little tongue. And that is the most difficult part of our little pocket pet puppy done. His tongue's on, his nose and his little mouth are in place, his eyes are on, his eye patch is there. Now we just have to put on the big pieces, which are much easier to decide upon now that his face is done. So we are going to move on to the arms next. You want to take your first arm and thread up that tail you left with your yarn needle. And this is sort of where you can decide where to put them. I like my arms to be in the middle, somewhat on the front side of the body. I kind of like that look, like they're out in front, as opposed to being on the side. Now you can put them on the side, but remember, you're putting big floppy ears on your dog, and you don't necessarily want them to completely cover your arms. I mean, you could, that doesn't it's a design choice, you guys can decide, but I like my arms out the front a little bit, so it looks like he could almost carry an ice cream if his arms were just a little bit longer, but not quite. So, take your threaded needle, and same thing we did with the tongue. You're going to pinch the ends together. I like to start with my fasten off on sort of towards the very edge. I'm going to lay it where I want it, starting on the side with my eye patch, because again, that's the biggest feature on the face, and I kind of want to work off of that. I like this arm to be right sort of in the middle of the body, and I do the same thing I did with the tongue. So I pick up a stitch on the body, and then I pick up the 2 stitches, or a couple of stitches, that are on either side of the arm piece. Sort of pull that taut, and because this is such a short little piece, it doesn't really require a lot of stitches. Pick up another body stitch, and 2 sides, go through both sides of the arm, and I'm just going to do that stitch one more time, all of it together. There we go. And that's really all it needs. Now, if this little pocket pet is going to a little person, and that little person is kind of hard on their toys, make sure that you make all of the little pieces you're sewing down on there nice and tightly. So you might want to go back and forth across the arm a couple times, just in case he gets carried around like this a lot. But if it's just for yourself, or for someone who's a little older, or just a collector, then you only need to put in a handful of stitches across the top. Take what's left of the yarn, and take your yarn needle out through a little hole in the back, doesn't matter where, because once again you're going to put on the second arm, and you're going to pull that string out through the middle back, knot them together, and then weave it back in, and that saves you having knots on the outside of your work. So I'm going to go ahead and sew on my other arm. pretty much opposite the first one. And I'll see you when they're both on. And there is both his arms on. Ta-da! The next thing we're going to do is put on his ears. And you're going to do the same method that you did for the tongue and the two arms. So you're going to take your ears and you're going to pinch them so that the cast off or the fasten off stitch is sort of to one edge. And make sure they're both like that. And remember, it doesn't matter if one's a little bit bigger than the other. You're going to take your pocket pet and decide where you want them to sit on his head. Do you want them a little bit far apart or closer together? I like sewing them sort of, here's the center or the middle. That was the first row of the body. I like to position mine across sort of the edge of the second row. And I just use that middle piece as a guide. So as long as I don't sew over top of that, then I feel that my ears remain pretty evenly distributed. And you're going to do the same thing. So you're going to pinch it together and thread up your yarn needle using the long tail. And when you sew, you're going to sew through both sides of the ear at the same time. So for example, when you lay your ear down, you decide that's where you want it. I'm going to lay it across that second row, and I'm going to pick up a stitch. So pick up a stitch just along the edge of the body. That looks like a good piece right there. And anchor my string to it, and then pick up the first two stitches, both sides of my ear at the same time, and then pull it tight. And that's how I'm going to work across the edge of that sort of center bit. There we go, for the whole ear. Then when I get to the front, I'm going to maybe put in a couple of extra stitches. I'm going to pull my yarn to the back through a single hole and do the same thing with the other ear, knot the ends together and weave it in. And then my ears are on. And there we go. There's both the ears on my little puppy. So I sewed them along the top. See, I left the centerpiece empty, and that's the guide I used to sew them down. I pulled both the ends out through a common hole in the back, knotted it together, weaved them in, and there you go. Now there's one last little detail to put on our puppy, and that would be his cute little wagging tail. You're going to thread up your tail, and if you haven't got that tail or that yarn kind of right at the very edge, you just go ahead and kind of put it there. Then you're going to decide where on the back of your little puppy you want that tail to sit. I like it at the back and maybe one row up from the bottom. So if I use this as the bottom, I'm going to do it across the 3 rows that are above that, right in the middle. And you're just going to do what you did sort of with all the other pieces. You're just going to pick up a couple stitches on the body of your puppy and then run it through both sides of the tail. There you go. Do that a few times. Remember, if it's going to a little person that's hard on their toys, to make sure that that's sewn on nice and tightly. Otherwise, you only need a few little stitches up and down, and then your tail is on. When you're finished sewing on the tail of your puppy, you're going to do something a little bit differently. So you're going to make a knot at the bottom, or somewhere near the bottom, of the tail of your puppy. So one simple little knot. Make sure it's as tight as you can make it. And if it doesn't feel tight enough, go ahead and make a second one in the same place. Now this is going to create a little knot at the bottom of your tail, but because your tail is sort of a funny looking little thing to begin with, it's not really going to show. So just make sure it's as tight as you can make it to the tail. Then you're going to take your yarn and you're going to weave it into the inside of the tail that you made. You don't necessarily have to go through too many of the stitches, but just weave it, oops, weave it back and forth a few times through the center of your tail. And once you've done that and you feel like it's been put in there, it's just 2 or 3 times, then you can just trim the rest. There we go. And we're going to do what I talked about earlier. So we're going to take the tail and we're just going to manipulate it a little bit. So I want a little bit of a bend in the tail. I want it to look like it's sitting up so that when he wags it, he looks really, really happy. And there you go. That's a stiff little tail. And you can bend it into any shape you like. I like mine pointing up. And that is how you make a pocket pet puppy. These guys are so cute. I think they're going to go have a tea party. Arf, arf, arf. And that is how you make a little pocket pet puppy. Try and say that 10 times fast. Pocket pet puppy, pocket pet puppy, pocket pet puppy, pocket pet puppy. I don't know, maybe 3. I got 3 out. That's how you make a pocket pet puppy. And he's a lot like his kitty cousin. And that is what makes this a fun little group of toys to make. I love this little series. We're going to totally keep it going. There's another one coming up soon, and I'm not going to tell you what it is because it's a surprise, but I've got him sitting in this room somewhere. I spy? I don't know. Anyway, that's it for this week, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in and making a little pocket pet puppy with me. I really appreciate everybody saying hello and leaving comments, and I do read them all. And I thank you very much for sharing their pictures with us too on Google Plus and on Instagram and on Pinterest. And also you can share them with me at my Etsy store. I have a little place where you can message me and send me some photographs. So please feel free to send me photos on all of those venues. And we will see you again very soon on the Jayda InStitches though.